Hello everyone, Professor Berninger here. Going to take you on a little trip to the Midwest, where Mark Twain was made. Of course, he was born Samuel Clemens, but his pen name, the name he wrote under, was Mark Twain. So we're going to go to Hannibal, Missouri, a place that he made famous and they're very proud of, and Florida, Missouri, where he was born. And as he said when he was born, he increased the population to 100. But here's a little inspiration for you. I always dreamed about visiting authors' homes, and when I had the chance for a sabbatical at Columbia Green, I put in my application, and I was granted. So nothing happens unless first to dream, and my dream did come true to visit, I believe, 46 authors' homes in 26 states. And this is a nice stepping stone at the Carl Sandburg House in Illinois, Galesburg, Illinois. But that's just a little inspiration for all of you aspiring literary travelers in the room. So we are going to head out and we are going to go to right there, Hannibal, Missouri, which is on the Mississippi River. And then we'll drive a little further on to Florida, Missouri, where Mark Twain was born. And of course, most of the sites I visited were in the Northeast, which was a lot easier, but not today. Today we're going to the Midwest. Welcome to Hannibal, America's hometown. Of course, two great books set in Hannibal, written by Mark Twain, The Adventures of Tom Sawyer, which I wouldn't call it a children's book, but it's a little lighter, a little more entertaining. But the sequel, The Adventures of Huckleberry Finn, is a very serious book. Very funny, but a very, very serious book where Twain tackles racism in America and many of the problems he sees in American society. And he is their favorite son. This is what welcomes you to Hannibal, Missouri. It's very beautiful right on the river, and there's a river boat that you can take a ride on. And Mark Twain, of course, he came up with his pen name because Mark Twain is what someone yells out to the riverboat pilot. And Mark Twain was a riverboat captain, a pilot for a little while. And someone hangs over the rail on the front of the boat, and they drop a weight down. And when it's clear sailing, not sailing, when it's clear for the boat to go through, when it's deep enough, it hits, I believe, the second knot on the rope, and yells out Mark Twain. So Mark Twain was what the depth finder guy yelled to the riverboat pilot to say, hey, it's safe, we can go through here. And there's a shot of maybe the island that inspired the island section of The Adventures of Huckleberry Finn. That's right outside Hannibal in the middle of the Mississippi River. And there's Hannibal, a picture of Hannibal taken from the riverboat that I took a ride on. And they built a very impressive seawall, and that has saved the place once or twice. It's very expensive to build, but it paid itself off. And when I was there, I stayed here, a place called Lulabelle's B&B. The building has a distinction. It is one of the few buildings in America built specifically to be a brothel, a place where you can go and patronize a prostitute. You can no longer do that there, at least as far as I could tell. But the proprietor was a very friendly guy from New York, and I had a great stay at Lulabelle's B&B and highly recommend it in Hannibal. The Mark Twain Boyhood Home and Museum is extensive. I think they have 5 buildings, and two of them are basically museums with exhibits, and the first part is much more, I would say much more serious, and that's where we're going to start first. And there's a very nice lady who greeted me, and I told her that I was from Kinderhook, New York. Actually, I said I was from Kinderhook. And she said, oh, you haven't come far. And I said, what do you mean? I didn't say that, but I thought I've come thousands of miles. Turns out there's a Kinderhook, Illinois, right across the river from Hannibal, and we'll take a little side trip there. So this is a very well done museum, relatively recent, lots of interactive exhibits without being stupid or overly clever. And of course, the one thing I look for in a 19th century museum historic site is, do they address slavery? Or do they make believe it didn't happen? Or is it a footnote? But you can see here that they take slavery head on. They take slavery head on and talk about it quite adamantly. And got a little ahead of myself there. But that panel that we were looking at a second ago, Mark Twain would have heard, and his mother would have heard from the pulpit in churches everywhere, the gospel of slavery. Ministers would have preached how good it was for everyone involved. And Mark Twain grew up around slavery in Missouri, which in most regards is a southern state. But you see the museum here is very well attended. These people are very serious museum goers and they're taking it all in. Over here on the left is a printing press, and Mark Twain did work for his brother who was a printer, and maybe that's where he learned a little bit about the English language. Here is the house that Twain, his boyhood home, where he grew up, and it's a marvelous place to visit. They put up a white fence. Sort of one of the most famous scenes in all of American literature is in The Adventures of Tom Sawyer, where Tom Sawyer tricks his friends into painting the white fence for him. And it's an ongoing joke among smart people in America that when you trick someone to do your work for you and that it's somehow fun and a privilege, you're like Tom Sawyer getting his friends to paint the white fence. That's the house that Twain grew up in, and very interesting place to visit because you never really get inside the four walls, but you wind up inside this sort of alleyway that you guys see here. You sort of wind up in between these two buildings looking in. And this is what you see. It's kind of cool. It's kind of like an aquarium or terrarium. There's no water. You look into the rooms, and it's this great feeling that you can almost get into the past, but not quite. I really liked the plexiglass panels. Maybe they're not for everybody, but I thought they were kind of cool. And they have these interesting quotations from Twain in the house. This is a good one. A person's nature never changes. What it is in childhood remains. Under pressure, it can partially or wholly disappear from sight, and for considerable stretches of time, but nothing can ever permanently modify it. Nothing can ever remove it. I believe that. I'm pretty much the same person I was when I was a kid. Different stages of life give you different opportunities to be that person. And it's just true. We're pretty much who we are when we were kids, which isn't to say we're not capable of change and improvement. But Twain, that's a great quotation because Twain left Hannibal. He came back much later in life, but Hannibal certainly never left him. There's another one. Nothing remains the same when a man goes back to look at the house of his childhood. It has always shrunk. There's no instance of such a house being as big as the picture in memory and imagination for it. 100% true. If you guys went back to your elementary school, middle school, high school, you would be like, man, this place is tiny. It's just nothing is as big as you remember it. Across the street is one of the famous Twain characters, Becky Thatcher, and the house that the young woman who she's based on lived. And this part of the museum hasn't quite been updated yet. Here's a sort of a goofy, well, not too goofy, but a model of Becky Thatcher, and the level of interpretation, the captions, the museum text was just not up to snuff. But hopefully they've gotten that straightened out since I was there in 2006. Hannibal, it was once a very prosperous place, but you can see here at noontime, it's really quiet. The population of many Midwestern states and small cities has gone into pretty steep decline in the last 100 years. You can see here it was once a pretty grand place. It is the home of Progresso Soup, so they still have some industry. And about 80,000 people a year visit Hannibal because of the Mark Twain Museum. So that's a good thing. And there's a department store that's turned into another museum. It's all under the same auspices, but there, as I said, I think 5 buildings in town to visit when you're there, specifically for Mark Twain. And this one is a little more kid-friendly. You know, a little bit more about Tom Sawyer than about Huckleberry Finn. So that's great. The museum appeals to all ages. It appeals to the college professor and also a kid who just wants a little adventure. They have some very nice prints up. They have this great room here on the left where you can sort of stand and make believe you're a river pilot. So important to Mark Twain, those years that he spent doing that. And you can stand at the wheel and look out over the river. It's pretty cool. And it does turn. You can touch it. It's pretty awesome. Upstairs of the museum is almost like going into Mark Twain's attic from his whole life. There's all kinds of interesting stuff through the years. In this house over here, I'll show you a picture of that later. That's the Hartford, Connecticut house. But he was a mega celebrity in his lifetime. Mark Twain was a mega celebrity in his lifetime. There is no even remote equivalent today for an author. Yeah, a lot of people know maybe Stephen King might recognize him. Mark Twain, mega celebrity. And look, you know, there were mugs and plates, statues that you could buy about him. He was quoted in newspapers. The world was fascinated by Mark Twain. And he was given an honorary degree at Oxford. And he was, in later life, he liked white suits, which are pretty cool, I think. There's me standing with a couple of cool things I like. I like a nice bust, and that is a gigantic bust. You know, most busts are a little bigger than somebody's head and neck, but that one is huge. I was almost a little scared standing next to it that I was going to tip over on me. And of course, a bicycle. Mark Twain liked everything. He liked new inventions, and he did ride and have a bicycle. Not that one, but that's a pretty early bicycle. Those things were pretty dangerous. They were called bone crushers because people would tip over and break their bones on them. And that's me with a bicycle and a bust in 2006, looking pretty young, a little more hair, and boy, look how skinny I was. When I travel alone, if I can't find food that I like and I think is healthy, I just don't eat. Which I don't recommend, but I'm gotten better at that. But I got pretty skinny on that trip. But pretty happy guy. Look at that guy. And they are, and I'm sure this is now done, working on rebuilding the house where, I can't remember the boy's name. His last name was Blankenship. And he is the boy that Huckleberry Finn is most likely based on. Sort of a local, lovable urchin, Huckleberry Finn. So they are rebuilding the house that the character for Huck Finn was based on. And it's a really pretty cool looking house. And back here is one of the many things in town that takes advantage of the Mark Twain dinette. It's a giant mug of root beer, not full of course, but rotating very slowly, and that's the pretty cool thing. There's Becky's Old Fashioned Ice Cream Parlor. There's Pudd'nhead Wilson is another book by Twain, collectibles. There's the home of Mark Twain Fried Chicken. So the city does Hotel Clemens, indoor pool, Mark Twain Wax Museum, 2 miles to Sawyer's Creek. And then, of course, the cave tour. There's a famous cave scene in Tom Sawyer, and you can get a good cave tour. More caves in Missouri than any other state. And the hotel Mark Twain is old and boarded up. And there's a guy I came across collecting money for Shriners on my way out of town. And that is we're going to cut things off there because I'm approaching my 15-minute YouTube limit, and we'll pick up with Kinderhook, Illinois in our next slideshow.